Melanie, and good morning, everyone. Happy spring, woohoo! Welcome to all of you here in the sanctuary and those of you on Zoom. I wave to you as well. I'm the Reverend Dr. Barbara Wells Tenhove, and am currently serving as your sabbatical minister while our minister, Paul Beckel, is away. Unfortunately, Stephanie Rains, who was going to help lead today's service, is under the weather. So you get me instead. As I told Carrie when she called me last night, don't try this at home. I'm a seasoned professional. So here I am trying to fill in for Stephanie, mostly reading what she wrote, but I'll do my best to make it real and bring you honesty and intention to this work this morning. I'm really grateful to Stephanie. And Stephanie, if you're out there on Zoom, we love you. We're sorry you're not here. Stephanie asked me to ask you a very important question, or at least tell you something, which is, please turn off the ringer on your cell phone. We have to get used to being together in person, and that means turning off our phones. Now, we've invited everyone to wear hats this morning, which a lot of you have, which is great, and Carrie and I will be explaining why later, but if you didn't, that's okay. Bare heads are acceptable, but we're happy to see so many hats. Now, you might be interested to note that Paul, when he went on sabbatical, left us his hat to show us that he'd return. So here it is, joining all of us wearing hats today. I want to thank Carrie Kenline for taking the lead in today's service, and I must also acknowledge Genia Allen-Schmidt, who took part in its planning. Today, though the state mask mandate is no more, we are still asking that everyone, except for those of us up here in the chancel, wear masks. Next week, masks will be optional here in the sanctuary and in the whole building. And for the first time in over 2 years, we are having coffee hour in the social hall. Woo-hoo! Woo! This will be an opportunity to practice gathering with kindness and compassion toward each other as we each make whatever choice we need to feel safe, and as we travel through another chapter of navigating this pandemic, or as a friend of mine calls it, this pandamable. Next Sunday, I'll be preaching about the lessons that I've learned and some of you have learned about the pandemic, and it's not too late if you want to send me your thoughts on the lessons that you've learned from the pandemic, but you got to do it today or tomorrow at minister@buf.org. Okay, whew. Deep breaths. Once more behind our masks. So now I'd invite you to stand if you are willing and able and remove your hats as a respectful gesture. We all know that removing hats is a respectful gesture in so many cultures and places, and I wish to acknowledge the land on which we are standing. These are the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed from time immemorial. Please join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. Let's take a deep breath in respect. And now you may return your hat to your head and be seated for this morning's prelude. Thank you, Melanie, taking us right to Thanksgiving with that song. Some of us can't hear that without just wanting to eat turkey. Well, good morning again. Remember, I am not Stephanie, but I'm going to do my best to represent what she wrote and share it in a way that makes sense. She wanted me to note how happy she'd be to see all of you in your hats. Makes me happy, too. You look marvelous, darling. You look marvelous. And I bet your hats all have wonderful stories. There's something about the act of dressing up, particularly in something special like a hat, that makes us feel even more special. Stephanie told me about her 50th birthday party and how she invited friends to wear festive attire, including happy hats, and to come to the event prepared to share a story about the joy of aging. Well, there are some joys to this. Stephanie remembers the sweetness, and I love that word, the sweetness of that gathering, the fun of wearing hats, and the richness of the conversation that took place. The hats then and today are creating a special occasion, a little different reality with a special focus, and it's about all of us doing something together that might feel a little odd or different. Sharing in our discomfort can be an amazing equalizer. As the pandemic recedes and things change again here at BUF, we want to recognize that there is a window of opportunity before rushing back to forms and structures from the before times. Maybe we want to try some new things. Maybe we want to be intentional about how we widen the circle and move toward beloved community. Maybe we want to experiment with wearing some new hats. Maybe we want to connect with each other in new ways. Carrie will be telling us more about how the book, The Art of Gathering, could provide tools to help us utilize this opportunity. There are 3x5 cards in the pews where you can tell us something that interests you from this service as it unfolds. Perhaps something new that you would like to try in the art of gathering. You can drop the cards in the, there'll be a basket or a hat out in the foyer for you to put it in there. But if you don't find that, find me or Carrie, we'll happily take them. And we invite those of you on Zoom to type something that interests you from the service into the chat as things unfold. And we'll remind you of all of this again at the end of the service. I hope that after this service, you listen to some of the hat stories as you get to know folks here today. For while we're still not doing coffee hour downstairs until next Sunday, we will have coffee hour outside the front doors after the service, which will give you a chance to chat. Chat with hats. I should make a little Dr. Seuss story of that. But now, as we move deeper into worship, let's light our flaming chalice, which is the symbol of our faith. And Stephanie chose a reading from Kimberly Carlson called A Place of Belonging and Caring. It is not by chance that you arrived here today. You have been looking for something larger than yourself. Inside of you, there is a yearning, a calling, a hope for more, a desire for a place of belonging and caring. Through your struggles, someone nurtured you into being, instilling a belief in a shared purpose, a common yet precious resource that belongs to all of us when we share. And so you began seeking a beloved community, a people that does not put fences around love, a community that holds its arms open to the possibilities of love, a heart home to nourish your soul and share your gifts. Welcome home. Welcome to worship. Please join with me in reciting our covenant. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service gives it life. Celebrating our diversity and joined by a quest for truth, we work for peace and honor all creation. This is our covenant. Now, I want to invite you to experiment with connecting in a new way, non-verbally. I'm going to ask you to make a connection with someone or someones in this sanctuary, or if you're in Zoom, on one of the Zoom boxes. We'd like you to particularly look for someone maybe you haven't met before, maybe you don't recognize them behind their mask, maybe you haven't seen them in a while. And I want you to just welcome them into worship, non-verbally. Don't move very far from your place, and maybe find a way to use your hat. So for example, I might look at Kevin. See? So let's just take a moment to non-verbally say hello to people nearby. Good luck with the non-verbal.
Hey, didn't you hear that non-verbally part? All right, you might want to stay standing because we're actually going to sing now. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Carrie Kenline. I'm a longtime member of this fellowship and a member of the celebrant team. And I just have to say that this hat I'm wearing is made from a mushroom and was purchased on the pilgrimage to Romania a few years ago, the BUF choir pilgrimage. So there was a typo in the order of service. We're actually singing hymn number 407 in the gray hymnal. We are going to sit at the welcome table. Thank you. Well, as Barbara mentioned, our service this morning is inspired and informed by a book called The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. And it was one of those books that when I read it, I kind of wanted everybody I knew to read it. Priya Parker was trained and worked for many years in conflict resolution, first on college campuses in the United States, working on race relations, and then she moved to peace processes in the Arab world, Southern Africa, and India. And these days, she's focusing on helping all kinds of people transform their gatherings. She says, gathering, the conscious bringing together of people for a reason, shapes the way we think, feel, and make sense of our world. We spend our lives gathering, but we spend much of that time in uninspiring, underwhelming moments that fail to capture us, change us in any way, or connect us to one another. Can any of you relate to that? Gatherings consume our days and help determine the kind of world we live in, both in our intimate and our public realms. The way we gather matters. So I am a convert now. I have come to believe that the art of gathering is a sacred endeavor. But I feel a little sheepish being the deliverer of that message because, frankly, I've gotten into a habit of avoiding gatherings. I'm not really sure I know how to be around people anymore. Like you, I have weathered 2 years and counting of this pandemic and trying to keep track of what's safe to do when. And I've ended up spending a lot more time at home. Sometimes it's out of genuine safety concerns. Sometimes it's out of, anxiety, I guess. Sometimes I have to admit it's out of convenience and habit. I'm so used to staying at home. But it's not just that. I've also found a newfound appreciation for quiet time and for not overstuffing my schedule with too much. I'm guessing that I'm not alone in feeling this way. Our usual ways of gathering have been dismantled, and we can't assume anything right now. Many of us are a bit lost or a bit hesitant, and many of us are feeling more discerning about how we spend our time. And that might not be such a bad thing. When old structures get dismantled, it opens a space to think in fresh ways, and for each of us to make fresh choices about when and how we want to gather, and hopefully to eliminate or transform the gatherings that were ineffective and energy draining, and bring more meaning and intention to all the ways we come together. We do gather in so many ways here at BUF. So this morning, I invite you to open your heart and your mind to how we might make those worship services, meetings, community dinners, coffee hours, and special events as meaningful as possible and well worth showing up for. Now, before I go further, Kevin is going to lead the Chalice Choir in sharing the beautiful old song, "The Water as Wide." As you listen to both the words and the music, I encourage you to let them touch your heart, and I encourage you to tune into the feeling of what it takes to cross barriers and make a heartfelt connection. You know, it's so beautiful when the choir comes together like that, such a place of sweetness and heart, and to get there it takes a lot of muscle and technology and willingness and attention. And I think the same is true for the art of gatherings, that there's a lot of sort of underlying stuff that makes it actually work. And that's what we're talking about this morning. So in her book, Priya Parker does an amazing job of examining every minute detail of what makes gatherings work. But I'm not going to try to share all of that. I'm just going to focus on three aspects of what she talks about: purpose, generous authority, and pop-up rules. So let's start with the first most obvious one, purpose. A clear, well-defined purpose helps make any gathering more meaningful, effective, and satisfying. Whether it's a world summit, a 4-year-old's birthday party, or a worship service. That may seem obvious, but it's interesting how often people kind of bypass the step of figuring out what the purpose is for why they're meeting, and just kind of on autopilot do things the same way they've always done them. And Priya Parker looks at this as a missed opportunity. She shares about a missed opportunity from her own life when she was pregnant with her first child, and her women friends and family members threw a baby shower for her. It was a predictable one with the usual decorations, party games, gifts, and foods. It was fine, it was nice. But in retrospect, she realized it didn't fulfill what was for her and her husband a very real need at the time. They didn't actually need more stuff. They needed something to help them transition into being parents, together and as individuals. An event created around that need and purpose might have looked a little more like the shower that Genia, our director of lifelong learning, recently hosted for her son Caleb and daughter-in-law Taylor in Montana last fall. The shower was for both of the parents-to-be, not just the mother-to-be. It was a casual outdoor gathering for their friends, many of whom are Montana smoke jumpers. Genia knew some of them, but asked Caleb if there could be a moment for everyone to introduce themselves briefly and explain their connection to Caleb and/or Taylor. Caleb, expecting a little blowback from introducing anything a little more formalized to the party, reluctantly agreed. It's often a little uncomfortable to ask people to shift from casual visiting to something a little more intentional. But that casual, intentional sharing of introductions in a large circle ended up turning into a powerful testament to the many ways Caleb and Taylor were loved and supported by their community. As each person or couple explained their connection to them, they added messages of love, support, and advice. The entire atmosphere of the gathering changed from an unorchestrated milling about of strangers to a united group celebrating Caleb and Taylor's upcoming parenthood. Another result was that the ice was broken. People who hadn't known each other before reached out to others, and the discreet cliques broke up as they moved and mixed freely. As we ponder how gatherings benefit from a clear and guiding purpose, addressing a real need, let's think about the worship services here at BUF. When we're doing it well, everything in the service supports a purpose, though those purposes may vary from Sunday to Sunday, and sometimes they need to change at the 11th hour, which is actually true this morning. I remember, well, the purpose didn't change, just the particulars. I remember that in March of 2020, Sue Livingston, Carol Shepard, and I were all set to do a service on the women's suffrage movement and applying it to what was going on with women today. A very important topic. Then the pandemic hit, and we suddenly had to shift to a service on Zoom. We were asked if we wanted to do our service, and it just didn't feel right. All three of us felt strongly that the original plan would not have met a clear and obvious need that we were experiencing and suspected others were feeling. What we needed was to know we were still a community, that our community would travel through whatever was before us safely and connecting in the ways we could. And we needed to know that our minister, Paul, was going to be there with us, even if it was in a different way than we were used to. We didn't discount that talking about women's suffrage was an important purpose, but it wouldn't have spoken to the intense and unforeseen circumstances we were all suddenly facing. Paul, who had been away at a secluded conference, was caught up to speed, and he showed up and created a simple, direct, reassuring service, Zoom service from his home. And it was kind of clumsy. We weren't very used to Zooming back then, but it was amazingly meaningful to me. And I heard that for many, it met the need of the moment. Having a clear and well-defined purpose adds to the potency and relevance of a gathering. You can usually feel it when there's a clear underlying purpose. It can also make it more controversial. Not everyone will be pleased every time, and that's okay. So, for instance, here, the purposes of any given service might not match up with your particular need of the moment. And that's part of being community together, to kind of ebb and flow with that. If the purpose is too vague and undefined, it won't be very effective. And if it tries too hard to please everybody or meet too many purposes, it will just feel scattered and diluted and not be very satisfying. No matter what the gathering, it's helpful if there's someone keeping their eye on the designated purpose and making choices that help to fulfill it. And that brings me to the second concept of Priya's that I want to bring into the service today, and that's the concept of generous authority. But what does that mean? Well, whether you're hosting a party, leading a meeting, or creating an event, you may find that you are hesitant to ask anything of the participants or inconvenience them in any way. It took some courage for Genia to suggest that that gathering move from just casual visiting to something a little more intentional. But here's the thing, she wasn't doing it out of a need to boss everyone around. She was doing it in the service of a bigger purpose that the gathering was trying to fulfill. And people can feel the difference. I'm sure you have all been at events where people weren't hesitant to ask you to do lots of things that didn't have much meaning towards the purpose. So generous authority means asking something of people, even if it means risking some pushback from some people, in the hopes that by the end of the gathering, most people will have had a fresh and engaging experience. Genia is actually incorporating many threads from the art of gathering into a revisioning of the Wednesday night community night dinners. And she's one of the people I got to read the book. These evenings will be focused on both deepening our relationships with each other, as well as welcoming in newcomers in a deliberate, explicit way. With the use of generous authority, we will use trained hosts and offer some thoughtful prompts to foster more inclusive, meaningful conversations, making the evening more than just a quick dine and dash. It will be family-friendly as well, with childcare and activities afterwards to serve the needs of busy parents and build intergenerational relationships. By clearly defining a purpose for our evenings together, and with a bit of guidance, we can make community night dinners richer, deeper, and potentially transformative. So we're hoping you'll come and lean into your willingness to open to this fresh approach when we're ready to get those Wednesday night dinners going again. Now, I have a little more to share, but first, let's take a break from me talking and do a little singing together. Through this song from the Youngbloods, we're going to conjure the spirit of connection from the year 1966. Words are in your order of service. The song we sing is the way we die. You can make the mountains sing, or make the angels cry. While the bird is on the wing, what a willing group you are. Thank you. All right, now I want to talk with you about pop-up rules. This morning, we invited you all to wear hats. Early in the service, Barbara invited you to take off your hats in respect as she acknowledged this land and the Lummi and Nooksack peoples. When it came time for greeting, she asked you to do it without words. She used her generous authority to ask something of you. Many of you probably appreciated it. Some of you may have felt some resistance. These were all examples of what Priya Parker would call pop-up rules. They are rules that are temporary, that apply to the particular event that they were created for. Rules that are put in place to break norms, to take us out of autopilot, and help create a shared alternate reality. So, a so-called Jeffersonian dinner might ask that guests not talk to the person next to them, but only to the whole table. A wedding invitation might specify that the entire ceremony and festivities will be unplugged and request that people kindly plan to turn off their phones and cameras. A networking event might ask participants to put aside their sales pitches and instead discuss in small groups how to address a community problem. They might be asked to wait until the end of the event to share their names and their businesses. And you can imagine how in each of these cases having specific, clearly articulated, somewhat controversial rules could shake things up a bit and potentially help people feel more present, engaged, and connected. But pop-up rules can also do something else. They can make an event more inclusive. Let me explain. In any group, there are certain ways people tend to do things and shared assumptions about what's acceptable and polite. Even here, and we're quirky, as we've heard, and willing to try things. But, if you happen to be white, upper middle class, over 50, English speaking, and a lifelong Unitarian, you may have a certain set of assumptions about what should happen in our gatherings. And those assumptions might be a little different from someone who is a different age, has less money, comes from another country, has a different first language, religion, skin color, and the list goes on. And without meaning to, just by doing things the way we've always done them, very well-intentioned people can easily leave out anyone who's different or new to the community. So one way of addressing this is to educate ourselves and expand our understanding of people, and we really do a lot of that here at BUF. Another way is to sometimes introduce pop-up rules to our gatherings. As Priya Parker says, pop-up rules are perhaps the new etiquette. If implicit etiquette, absorbed from birth, was useful for gatherings of closed tribes, where everybody already knew the rules, explicit pop-up rules are better for gathering across difference. That makes sense to me. With fresh, different, and clearly described pop-up rules, no one is completely on familiar ground. Everyone's a little off-kilter and a little awkward as they adjust to doing things a little differently than they normally would. So pop-up rules can serve as a great equalizer. And if they get people working together to create an alternate shared reality, they have the potential of helping everyone feel a little bit more like they belong. In this fellowship, we've determined that we don't want to be a closed tribe. We want to widen our circle. We want to be welcoming. And with that in mind, Genia has been thinking about possible pop-up rules for BUF community dinners. So, for example, each meal is marked with a chalice lighting and message of gratitude, a reminder of the purpose of the meal, which is to create a sense of belonging and build connections, and a brief review of the night's pop-up rules. Everyone wears a name tag. Newcomers are welcomed by designated hosts and placed at tables so they aren't left sitting alone. People are invited to respond to a carefully considered prompt given by their table host, fostering deeper conversation and inclusion. Children and youth are given a routine task each evening, such as serving water at each table, so they develop a sense of being an active part of the community. Sometimes tables will be set up for discrete age or interest groups, and sometimes they'll be deliberately mixed. So take a moment to imagine how such gatherings might transform our BUF community over time, and how they might transform you over time if you were to participate in them. And I hope you will. As I come to the end of my message, I want to remind you about those index cards in the pew. And just if anything is bubbling up in you, or you're really connecting with something, or you think of a great pop-up rule, anything that's coming to you, just jot down a sentence on that index card, and we're going to set up a hat to drop those in just outside the sanctuary doors. Know that whether you are a leader or a participant in any of the gatherings here, your presence matters. Your willingness matters. You help to create something worth showing up for. Amen, and blessed be. And now we come to our time of passing the hat. So I want to thank you for all you do to contribute to this community, and thank you for your financial contributions, which help to support all the good work we do. We'll be passing a basket here in the sanctuary, and for those of you on Zoom, payment information will be on your screen.
Thank you, Melanie, and thanks to all of you for your generosity. I love that generous authority that Carrie was talking about. Generosity is so much a part of how we can and should move in the world. I really want to thank Carrie and Stephanie and Genia for thoughtfully helping us reflect on what it means to come back together. Although BUF has been meeting in person since the end of October, we're still kind of sorting it out. And so it's wonderful to be reminded of how important it is to be together. And one of the things that so many of us missed in those early days of the pandemic was the opportunity to sing together. Even if you're not a singer, bringing your voice into community helps us to feel connected across time and space. And this beautiful hymn, it's an old Welsh tune that the wonderful Unitarian Universalist Peter Mayer put new words to, helps us to feel the power and beauty of this world we live in. It's called Blue Boat Home. And it is number something. I don't have my order of service in front of me. Someone tell me what number it is.
1064.
1064 in your blue hymnal. Please rise in body or spirit and we'll sing together. Please be seated for the benediction.
We close now with a poem that was written by the wonderful young poet Amanda Gorman for the new year 2022.
May this be the day we come together,
Mourning, we come to mend. Withered, we come to weather. Torn, we come to tend. Battered, we come to better.
Tethered by this year of yearning, we are learning that though we weren't ready for this, we have been readied by it.
We steadily vow that no matter how we are weighed down, we must always pave a way forward.
This hope is our door, our portal.
Even if we never get back to normal, someday we can venture beyond it to leave the known and take the first steps.
So let us not return to what was normal, but reach toward what is next.
What was cursed, we will cure.
What was plagued, we will prove pure.
Where we tend to argue, we will try to agree. Those fortunes we forswore, now the future we foresee. Where we weren't aware, we're now awake. Those moments we missed are now these moments we make, the moments we meet, and our hearts once all together beaten, now all together beat.
Come, look up with kindness yet, for even solace can be sourced from sorrow.
We remember, not just for the sake of yesterday, but to take on tomorrow.
We heed this old spirit in new day's lyric. In our hearts we hear it, for auld lang syne, my dear, for auld lang syne.
Be bold, sang time this year. Be bold, sang time. For when you honor yesterday, tomorrow ye will find.
Know what we fought need not be forgotten, nor for none.
It defines us, binds us as one. Come over, join this day just begun.
For wherever we come together, we will forever overcome.
Now we extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we're together again. In a moment, we'll be singing our closing hymn, Circle Round for Freedom. But first, I want to encourage you to, when you go to the coffee hour, greet each other, ask about your hats. You can ask me more about my mushroom hat. Now, please join in whatever kind of circle makes sense. And we'll close with Circle Round for Freedom.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us in prison, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. For the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Go in peace, my friends. Return in love. Amen and blessed be.